different aspects of a problem and figure out a solution that works optimally. So my thesis today, and I'm going to talk to you today about this, the data is showing that veganism is the leading solution to change. You could argue whether it's the leading cause or not, animal agriculture, but it definitely going vegan is the leading solution to climate change. I'm going to show you that based on data. See, and Gus Speth, the founder of Natural Resources Defense Council, when he was asked about the environmental problems in the world, he said something. He said, I used to think that the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. And I thought that with 30 years of good science, we could address these problems. But I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with those, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation. And we scientists don't have to do that. See, but I am an engineer. So as an engineer, I have to look at every aspect of this problem. So you ask, why is there so much selfishness, greed, and apathy in the current system? And then you discover it's because of the game we are playing. The game of money is making us do these things. So then you can ask, what kind of transformation do we need to do? Not just spiritual and cultural, but also in the games we play and the stories we tell. Because that's how, as human beings, we coordinate our actions among millions and billions of us. So how do we change the world? How do we get the world to see this and to go vegan, right? And Anthony de Mello said, the world does not need to be changed. It needs to be understood. And when you understand the world, you will transform automatically and effortlessly, and the world will change with you. So it puts the onus on the individual to see what needs to be done. And of course, it all starts with education, right? Education, education, education. We need to tell people what is really going on. We need to show the facts. We need to show the data and let people make their own decision. See, Tracy Martin said, change is inevitable, but transformation is intentional. So I make the distinction between change and transformation. So I'll be talking about transformation because change is going to be forced on us by nature. And I transformed. I became a vegan when I took this picture of a fence in Rajasthan, India. And to the right of the fence, farmed animals were not allowed to go. And to the left, they were eating anything new that was growing on the ground. So I took this picture and I instantly went vegan. I realized that it was my consumption of animal products, and in my case, it was dairy products, that was causing the forest to die out in front of my eyes. So I did that about 12 years ago now, in 2008. And within a month, I lost all my arthritic pains. So my health improved. And I had, it was a bonus. I never even expected that to happen. And of course, I felt lighter as a human being because I suddenly, was in alignment with who I really was. So I see this as a metamorphosis of human beings. So we are going from our caterpillar phase to our butterfly phase. And so far we've been in the caterpillar phase. And now COVID-19 has put us in the chrysalis of the caterpillar. Because COVID-19 has said no more growth. You really cannot grow anymore. Because to just grow our economy, we have been doing economic growth at all costs especially over the last 40 years, 40, 50 years. And to achieve the kind of the growth that we have seen, we are now monetizing everything so that when a dead tree has more economic value than a live tree, we cut down a tree. When a dead animal has more economic value than a live animal, we kill the animal. And when a sick person has more economic value than a healthy person, we sicken people. That's what the economy is doing today. And the economic growth is also endangering life on Earth in the form of climate change, biodiversity loss, ecosystems collapse, and also pandemics. And to grow the economy, we are deliberately addicting everybody into compulsive behaviors. We lie to our children We lie to our children about protein, about calcium, and about Santa Claus and Easter Bunny. I mean, these are all lies that we tell them in order to make them become good consumers, so that they will become future adults with chronic diseases who will become customers for the pharmaceutical industry. And finally, we steal from the poor. And let me explain to you how that happens. So here, this is an illustration of caterpillars in a social pyramid, so to speak. And the caterpillars at the very top are the ones who control the whole pyramid. So they are the ones who produce money, and they trickle the money down the social pyramid in the form of loans. So money flow is shown in red. It always flows from the top to the bottom. And resource flow goes from bottom to top and then top to bottom. So bottom to top is when someone grows rice, let's say organic rice in India, and then she sells it to a trader who then brings it all the way to Costco, and we buy it for, say, $3 a pound for organic basmati rice. And if you go find out how much the woman or the family who grew the rice, how much did they get paid for it, you'll see that they get paid about 5 cents a pound. So because we have created an economic system in which you're allowed to take profits as much as you can as resources flow up the social pyramid. But when resources flow down the social pyramid, this is in the form of philanthropy. So if I donate $3 to charity, I expect to see $2.70 going to the recipient. So which means when resources flow down the social pyramid, we know how to do it efficiently, right? But when resources flow up the social pyramid, we deliberately take profits out of it. So this is how we steal from the poor. This is what I mean by stealing from the poor in order to enrich the rich people. So this is where the caterpillar is now, right? And so we cannot grow anymore. This cannot continue. It's just completely unsustainable. And we are now, deliberately promoting death, disease, and destruction. So death for the animals, diseases for human beings, and destruction for the planet, just to grow the economy, right? So we did 3 documentaries: The Human Experiment, Cowspiracy, and What the Health. And in the human experiment, we showed that we are pouring all these toxic chemicals into the environment, about 250 billion tons of it every year. And those chemicals then work their way up the food chain. And so in animal foods, they get concentrated by an order of 10 to 100. So 2 orders of magnitude concentration happens in the animal foods. So then we persuade people to eat animal foods. We tell them, if you're rich, you have to eat animal foods. Okay, we convince them to eat it, because we know that when we eat all those toxic chemicals, we're going to get sick. So then they come and give us pharmaceuticals to fix our sicknesses. So every step of the way, people are making money on this process. Okay? So this is how we are growing the economy right now, in a very unsustainable way. And now the pandemic. Okay, Dr. Anthony Fauci said this unusual human-animal interface that's responsible for this pandemic. And he said, it boggles my mind how when we have so many diseases that emanate out of that unusual human-animal interface, that we don't just shut it down. Well, what is this unusual human-animal interface that he's talking about? So I asked Dr. Aisha Akhtar, who is an expert at these infectious diseases, what is the cause of pandemics? And she said, stressed animals spawn pandemics. So any place where you stress animals is potential for another pandemic to show up. Okay, so it's not just the China's wet markets, but also America's factory farming, or any place where animals are being stressed, like in a scientific lab where they're stressing animals for their experiments. It's also a source of a potential pandemic. So if you look at all the past pandemics, mad cow disease, bird flu, Ebola, swine flu, all of them came from animals. SARS, they all came from animals and came from the stress that we cause animals. So the unusual human-animal interface is any interface in which animals are stressed. So if we want to avoid pandemics at the root cause of pandemics, we need to stop stressing animals. And can we not live like that? Of course we know how to live like that. Okay? And eating animal foods is the leading cause of death in Western countries. 14 of the 15 leading causes of death in Western countries can be mitigated and even reversed with a whole food, plant-based vegan diet. Okay? And 4 of those leading causes. Heart disease, lung disease, diabetes, and high blood pressure are the comorbidities that make COVID-19 so lethal. So people are dying because they have these diseases and they get COVID-19 and then they die. So we are making people who are rich eat all these bad animal foods and make them sick so that we can make money off of them. And simultaneously, we are starving people at the other end. So hunger-related causes are killing more people globally than any other ailment. Okay? So we have this completely unsustainable food system. And if you look at, why is there so much food insecurity in the world? You discover it is an artificial scarcity. So the IPCC has shown, you can look it up in chapter 11 of the fifth assessment report, that we are actually taking 6 times as much food as we really need from the planet. So we eat about 1.5 billion tons of food. It is shown on the right-hand side. That's our intake, of which 0.26 billion tons is straight, plant foods, unprocessed plant foods. 1.09 billion tons is processed plant foods, and 0.19 billion tons is animal foods. So animal foods are only about 15% of the food that we eat worldwide. Okay? But to produce this 0.19 billion tons of animal foods, we are actually taking 7.27 billion tons of plant foods and feeding it to our animals. So they produce 0.26 billion tons of food, which goes into this industrial processing block, and out comes 0.19 billion tons. The rest goes as waste. Now, it's not just food. Animals also produce 0.14 billion tons of other substances. They produce skin, blood, bones, and those things are used in pharmaceuticals, in clothing industry, in other manufacturing. So this is why going vegan is important. If we just change our diet, okay, then the industry is perfectly capable of raising animals just for their skin or just for their blood or their bone. They already do that with minks and foxes like that. Okay, so this is why I say we need to go vegan. When we go vegan, we are basically saying we don't want to use animals for any purpose whatsoever. So then we can eliminate this block. And when we eliminate this block, we can just take the food directly and eat it directly. And you will need a lot less food than what we're extracting from the planet. So this extraction of extra food, excess food from the planet to create an artificial scarcity, because we have an economic system in which if there is abundance, it's not worth anything, right? The price of the product goes to zero if we have too much abundance. So we have to create an artificial scarcity. That's the kind of economic system we have. So veganism is therefore the leading solution to biodiversity loss. So if you look at biodiversity, 10,000 years ago to 100,000 years ago, the total weight of all the wild animals was about 200 million tons. That's shown on the left here in this blue circle. Human beings were a tiny little blip. By 1970, wild animal biomass had been decreased by 60%. Okay, so they were about 80 million tons. And humans, our weight was equal to the weight of all the wild animals that lived 10,000 years ago. And on top of that, our farmed animals were double our weight, and they were eating roughly 3 times as much food as we eat. Okay, so their equivalent biomass is 3 times the biomass of human beings, or 3 times the biomass of all the wild animals that lived 10,000 years ago. That's 1970. Between 1970 and 2020, now it's an estimate because we only have data till 2016. I've just extrapolated, assuming that the Trump years, we did the same thing that we were doing before. Okay, I suspect we even did something worse. But let's say that we did that. What happened until 2016 can be extrapolated to 2020. So our biomass is double the biomass of all the wild animals that lived 10,000 years ago. Wild animals are down 80% from 1970 levels, which means they're actually down 92% from what they were 10,000 years ago. So only 8% of the biomass of wild animals is left on the planet. And our farmed animals are double our weight and eating the equivalent of 9 times the biomass of wild animals that lived 10,000 years ago. Let me just give you an example of why we need to consider, why I say that farmed animals are the equivalent of 9 times the biomass. See, if you look at just the weight of farmed animals, let's say the weight of a dairy cow. The dairy cow only weighs about 1,700 pounds. But she eats 140 to 150 pounds of food a day. Whereas a white rhinoceros in the wild weighs 5,100 pounds, so 3 times the weight of the dairy cow, and only eats 120 pounds of grass a day. So our dairy cow is eating more than a white rhinoceros. So as far as the planet is concerned, the dairy cow weighs more than a white rhinoceros. Because the planet doesn't care what you weigh, the planet cares what you eat. So the impact of the dairy cow is more than the impact of a white rhinoceros. This is why I look at the equivalent biomass of farmed animals. As an engineer, I need to take into account what the animals are really doing. So the leading solution to biodiversity loss is to go vegan. Then you can drop all this the weight that we are carrying around, eat the plants directly, and that will give room for wild animals to return back. Okay? In fact, we're using 37% of the land area of the planet just to graze our farmed animals. And all that grazing land can be returned back to nature if everybody goes vegan. So the leading solution to ecosystems collapse is also, if you go vegan, you will solve ecosystems collapse. What is ecosystems collapse? It means that we are preventing the forest from coming back. We have cut down the forest. We are trying to graze animals on that forest land. And the forest is desperately trying to come back, but we let our animals go and graze and kill anything new that's growing. So and eventually the forest just gives up and it collapses. The ecosystem collapses. So this is the leading reason for desertification on the planet. And we lose about 20 million acres of land every year to deserts. And that is all caused by grazing animals. So going vegan would be the leading solution to ecosystems collapse. So then let's talk about climate change. What is the leading solution to climate change? We always hear about fossil fuels and cutting down fossil fuels. So I'm going to give you an engineering analysis for what we should be doing with these two machines. So the burning machine, which is fossil fuels in industry, and the killing machine, which is animal agriculture. Now, both these machines have to be shut down. Okay? There's no question in my mind. Both of them have to be shut down if you want to get to a sustainable civilization. But there is an order in which they should be shut down. There is a way in which they should be shut down. And let me explain what that means, how we come to that analysis. So how do we power down these machines? So we look at the greenhouse gases that are causing climate change. So carbon dioxide is causing the equivalent of 1.68 watts per square meter of heating. So the amount of carbon dioxide that we have put into the atmosphere since 1750 is like adding a 1.68 watt heater on every square meter of the Earth's surface. Now, the other gases like methane, nitrous oxide, HFCs, and that we have put into the atmosphere are like adding another 1.7 watt per square meter heater. Okay. Now, we also have cooling gases that you put into the atmosphere. So it's not just heating gases. We also put cooling gases into the atmosphere like sulfur dioxide. So the cooling aerosols are causing negative 1.1 watt. So they're cooling the atmosphere by 1.1 watt per square meter. So overall, we are heating the atmosphere by 2.29 watts per square meter. Now, this is straight from the IPCC's fifth assessment report. Okay. So this is where we stand. Now, how do we now analyze what each machine is doing? So we looked at the annual emissions of the burning machine. So every year, the burning machine is adding 87% of the CO2, which is like adding another 0.027 watt per square meter of heating on the planet. So every year we're adding another 0.027 watt per square meter due to the CO2. It's adding 23% of the methane, so which is like adding another 0.022 watts per square meter of heating. Okay. But it's also adding 100% of the sulfur dioxide, which is cooling the atmosphere, cooling the earth by negative 0.95 watts per square meter. So which means the burning machine every year is causing the equivalent of cooling effect of negative 0.9 watts per square meter. So if we shut down the burning machine, we will actually heat up the earth by another 0.9 watts per square meter, which we don't want to do. It's silly to do that, right? So then we look at the killing machine. The annual emissions of the killing machine, it's responsible for 29% of the CO2, which is like adding another 0.009 watts per square meter of heating, 37% of the methane, which is 0.035 watts per square meter of heating, and it's using 37% of the land just for grazing our animals. And that land could be returned back to forests if we shut down the killing machine. And those forests could sequester 34.5 gigatons of CO2 every year. So it's like, so which means every year, if we shut down the killing machine, you would be causing the equivalent of, sequestering the equivalent of another 0.06 watts per square meter. So overall, if you shut down the killing machine, you'll cool the earth by 0.1 watts per square meter per year. Okay, so clearly from this analysis, it's obvious that we need to shut down the killing machine first, because that's not going to cause an unexpected heating of the planet. So the right way, the engineering solution to climate change, and believe me, only engineers know how to analyze this correctly. Okay, you don't go around asking a scientist how to solve problems, because they analyze the theory, they do the theory. Engineers actually implement it. So if you were to ask an engineer how to solve climate change, you would say, first power down the killing machine as soon as possible. And then you can power down at most 11% of the burning machine per year. So then you can power it down over the next 9 years. And if you do that, you won't heat up the earth any more than you're heating it up today. Okay? So that's an engineering analysis. So that shows you that veganism is the leading solution to climate change. And it's about changing our attitude. We really have to look at this as, we don't inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. So we have a responsibility to make sure that we leave an earth that is regenerating, that is recovering, that is thriving for our children. And we can do that. We can do that by taking this step first. So, and you can read more about my work at climatehealers.org. I've written a couple of books on this, Carbon Dharma and Carbon Yoga. You can read them at climatehealers.org. We've written a position paper detailing what I just showed you, and also a vegan world position paper. Okay. All the facts or the references to the facts, I try to be as thorough as I can because I'm an engineer. And I used to work on the internet, which is how we are able to communicate today. So thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you, Doctor, for that. That was a very thorough presentation, and I always like hearing you talk because it's very factual, very to the point. And so next up, Matt, which is a registered dietitian, I'd like you to kind of talk a little bit about, the doctor here talks about how we impact, the planet by going vegan. And I think you can let us know a little bit about, the nutrition aspect and how we do this and how we do it, being healthy still and not withering away like some people might imagine.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Vic. Thank you, Dr. Rao, for that wonderful presentation, man. And you see that data and, one, you're hopeful because someone's done that research and we can point to what we think we need to do. But on the other hand, man, it sure is scary what we're up against. So you can hear me okay? Everything looks good?
Yeah, everything looks good.
Get rolling here. So my name is Matt. I'm a dietitian. My expertise is more public health and in plant-based diets. I am going to show some slides. Man, so many things I could talk about in vegan nutrition, right? Love to talk about food. Love to talk about nutrition and all of these things. So I picked a couple slides that I think will be helpful just to see some of the things that we are indeed talking about. All right, just trying to share my screen here. There we go. PowerPoint, let me play from start. All right. So I work with Vegan Outreach. The founder of Vegan Outreach is actually a longtime friend of mine who's also a dietitian. And I helped create this Get Healthy, 30 Days to Get Healthy with Vegan Outreach as part of their 10 Weeks to Vegan program. Vic will send those links. It's great, man. If you just want to learn more about what veganism looks like, what the nutrition looks like, it's a free program. You get very helpful emails. You can join Facebook groups that are actually good. And this is part of the presentation I prepared for them. I'm going to go over some of this pretty quickly, right? Because I want to save times for question and answer. And if you have a question, you know, put it in and we can come back to it. If I go over a slide too quickly, happy to come back to it later. The first thing I like to show is this position paper from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. They're the umbrella organization for nutrition professionals. They are not a plant-based organization. They aren't even super friendly to veganism, honestly. But thankfully, we have a committed group of nutrition experts who work on this peer-reviewed position paper that says appropriate plant vegetarian diets, including vegan diets, are healthful, they may provide benefits, and they are appropriate for all individuals during all stages of the life cycle. This is great to have this paper. It's a great resource. It's really important as a place to be able to send people and say, hey, this is the latest research. It's updated every 5 years and whatnot. It's available online, Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics position paper on vegetarian diets. Really helpful. You know, if you have friends that doubt the science, just send them this. Really easy from an objective organization. So what does that look like? We're really fortunate. Vegetarians have been under research for a long time, which is weird, right? Because, you know, people who are eating paleo or they're eating keto, we don't have a lot of research on them because no one's been doing it that long. But Northeast United States, Massachusetts, they found all of these groups in the 70s that were eating vegetarian, and they started studying them, right? Convenient research group, bunch of people eating the same way. Now we have the Adventist Health Study. Adventists are a sect of Christianity, and they're advocates of plant-based diets. And this is one of the largest nutrition studies in the world. It's a cohort of 100,000 people. About half of them are vegetarian. And they basically follow these folks and see what they eat and see who develops what diseases. Really, really helpful to have this research. If you ever heard vegetarians and vegans, they live longer. That data comes from the Adventist Health Study, from the 1 and 2. And number 2 is ongoing right now. And it's cool because those cohorts have a lot of similarities, but also a lot of differences, because about half are vegetarian and half are omnivores, and about 10% are vegan, and that's gone way up. It's gone up 300% since the first Adventist Health Study done in the 90s. And so we can compare all these groups and look at it, get really good nutrition data. There's equivalent in the UK called the Oxford EPIC study, not quite as big, but still very helpful. So what are these outcomes? Vegetarians, and to a lesser extent vegetarians, have lower BMI, they have leaner body mass, they have lower rates of heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, some cancers, right? These are great leading causes of death. People who eat plant-based diets have lower rates of almost all of them. Pretty incredible. You know, I'm seeing this presentation about the environment, and ethically I'm concerned about animals. I would eat a vegan diet if it had zero benefits. But fortunately, eating plant foods is actually really good for us. So it's nice. It really lines up well. Good for the environment, good for the animals, good for our own health. You don't have to pick and choose any of them. So what are these mechanisms? Why? Well, fiber. You know, fiber is a short answer. What can you do to eat healthier? Eat more fiber is the short answer. Well, guess where fiber is? Only in plant foods, right? Not in animal foods, but in plant foods. More phytochemicals, more antioxidants. We'll talk about those. Less saturated fat. Most saturated fat that's consumed in the United States, at least, is from animal products. You get a little bit from coconut and palm, but not much. So what are they eating then? Whole grains, beans, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. All food groups with well-established benefits for human health. And we're going to talk about these food groups today. So what does a healthy vegan plate look like? Whole grains, legumes, vegetables and leafy greens, fruits, berries, nuts, and seeds. And what I say a lot in this program, because I work with a lot of people who are new to eating vegan or plant-based, I say, look, there's so many different ways to do this. You know, I grew up with a pretty standard American diet household, except I have an Italian-American mother who did cook, but we still had the protein and the veg side, and carbohydrate, but it doesn't always have to look like that. It can be a bowl. I mean, I joke that the biggest change with going vegan is that almost all my meals are in bowls now, or tacos. So you can make this your own, but here's an example of what a healthy plate could look like. But unfortunately, what most Americans eat is very, very different, right? This is looking at calories. Most calories come from processed food. Sad reality, processed food is subsidized, it's cheap, it's readily available, it's very profitable. You know, I really appreciate the doctor talking about the food chain and who profits and who doesn't. And processed food is very profitable, and it makes up the most of our diet, and but yet has very poor outcomes. Right? You should eat less processed food. I think everyone knows that. Animal food makes up about 25%. And plant food makes up 12%. You might be saying, hey, 12%, not too bad. Well, about half of that 12% is plant food that's like found in refined food. So like a peanut in a Snickers bar, or like a tiny, tiny blueberry that's in a bagel, that sort of thing. So most of the plants that we eat, you know, we're not eating the whole entire thing. Real unfortunate, lots of changes here that we can make. So what do these look like? I just want to go over some of these food groups to give you an idea. Common whole grains, corn, rice, oats, and whole wheat, eaten around the world. But some other additional ones: barley, buckwheat, bulgur, millet, quinoa, which isn't technically a grain, but we eat it as a grain, and wild rice. So grains and carbohydrates are not created equally. A lot of people say, oh, you know, they'll join our Facebook group for vegan outreach and say, okay, how can I do vegan low carb, right? Because carbs are bad. That's what everyone's taught, right? I work in sports nutrition and constantly going up against trainers who say very vaguely, carbs are bad. They don't understand carbohydrates. It's nutrition 101. If you took a nutrition class in a community college or in high school, you would learn this, but most people seem to not fully understand it, that brown rice is vastly different than a cupcake. And so fortified grains have some nutrients added back, but not the fiber, not the protein, or the phytochemicals, which are really beneficial to human health. So what does that look like? Whole grains versus refined. You know, are refined grains vegan? Yes, they are. Do I eat white rice? Yes. Sometimes I do. I think some's cooking right now if I can hear my Instant Pot. But whole grains have the benefits, right? And you're not doing the work to remove a healthy part. You're eating the entire thing. Better for the environment, better for our human health, right? You know that whole grains can contain some fat and some vitamin E and lots of fiber and trace minerals here, right? That we can get this from eating the whole grain in its entirety. So legumes, pulses, includes beans and lentils and split peas. Phenomenal source of protein. They're the number one source of protein for most people in the world, right? Most people around the world have a diet that's made up of a local grain and a legume of some sort. You know, it's changed a lot in the West. It's changed a lot in the last 100 years. Legumes can be an absolutely incredible part of a diet that extends longevity and helps with health outcomes. So legumes are a blue zone food. If you heard of the blue zone, it's an excellent book looking at the regions in the world where people live the longest. And the overlap is legumes, right? And eating predominantly plant foods, right? And so beans, absolutely good for you. A great way to replace meat, you know, and research looks at this. You replace meat with beans, you see health outcomes immediately because you're adding fiber and you're taking away saturated fat. So excellent. Here's just a few varieties that are common. Nutrition Powerhouse. Here, I'm going to go over this a little bit quickly, but you can see they have protein, they have fiber, they have micronutrients, and they have phytochemicals. We'll talk about phytochemicals in a little bit. So they fight disease. There's a link between bean consumption and a reduced risk of cardiovascular diseases. Increased legume consumption can significantly reduce both LDL cholesterol and A1C. You know, we're seeing the predictions for type 2 diabetes in the future are dire. It's not looking good. But we're fortunate in that simply just eating more beans can improve health outcomes, can lower A1C, increases insulin sensitivity, which is a good thing because it helps bring that glucose out of the blood, lowering your blood glucose level. And beans can do that. It's incredible, right? Beans, the magical fruit, right? We love the joke about them, but seriously, they could be life-saving. So vegetables and fruits, probably not new information to anyone here that you should eat more fruits and vegetables, right? I spent 7 years studying nutrition, and this thing I learned in kindergarten is still true. Eat your fruits and vegetables. But why? Well, they're nutrient dense with very few calories, and they have these disease-fighting phytochemicals. It's a fast, easy way to boost nutrition, right? I work with athletes sometimes, and they say, you know, Matt, I snack and I'm hungry still. You know, I'd say, oh, what did you have? They said, I had an apple. And I'm like, well, could you have 3 apples and put a little bit of peanut butter on that? And they go, wow, I never thought of that. 3 apples? Yes, we can eat 3 apples as a snack if you're really hungry. You know, we have this idea that they're only, you know, we eat one at a time and they're only a side and whatnot. But we don't have to eat that way, right? We can eat a lot more fruit and it will boost our nutrition. Of course, we want to limit refined and processed. Some have added sugar and fat, some have less fiber, water, and nutrients, right? French fries, technically a vegetable. The #1 eaten vegetable in the United States is French fries. Clearly, you're losing some of the benefits, right? Because you're not getting benefits from the whole food, but you're also adding fat, especially trans fat often, which is as unhealthy as saturated fat. The future of nutrition is plants. And I know you're saying, all right, vegan guy, you're biased. And it's true, I am. But we've cured scurvy, right? We're now looking at how can nutrition work to prevent these leading causes of deaths. And that future is plants. It is. 25,000 different phytochemicals with potential disease-fighting properties. What are those phytochemicals? Carotenoids in carrots, lycopene in tomatoes. We're getting a lot of lycopene research thanks to the ketchup industry. Take that for what it's worth, but hey, they're paying for some research at least. Isoflavones in soybeans. You know, the USDA is very stingy with what you're allowed to say on a label and health claims for food, and there really aren't that many. And there's only one for a specific food. Most of them are like, eat more fruits and vegetables and you'll lower your risk of cancer, right? It's general. But the one they have for specific food is about soybeans and reducing risk for heart disease through lowering cholesterol. And that's partly the isoflavones in soybeans. Soy is good for you, it's healthy, it's safe. We can talk about that if it comes up in questions, but really important. And then flavonoids in cacao, which is the bean that we make chocolate from. Very good for you, very high in antioxidants. Some really interesting research from Harvard about indigenous folks who live in an island off of Panama that I can't remember the name of right now. And they drink cacao drinks every day, and hypertension is unheard of on that island. They move to the mainland Central America, they adopt a more Western diet, guess what? More hypertension. And so food really has a strong role here. Berries, beets, we're going to talk about those. Leafy greens, right? Salad greens, cooked greens. These are things that can easily be added to our diet and we'll get these health benefits while also lowering our carbon footprint. You know, I hated salad as a kid, and even though I'm vegetarian, I thought salads were just, you know, old cucumbers and tomatoes from far away that didn't taste like anything. But that's not the case. We can make really good salads. You know, we have lots of different greens to choose from too. You know, kale isn't the only one. And so these have tremendous health benefits. And then berries, you know, these slides are from looking at disease prevention, and leafy greens and berries are something that we really try to emphasize because of their health properties. It's amazing. These like delicious, sweet, colorful fruits that grow readily here in California can help with our health and our longevity. We're really fortunate. So they're high in nutrients, they're naturally sweet, You can add them to oatmeal. You can eat them as a snack, frozen, cheap and convenient. Man, I always have frozen blueberries. You know, sure, I wish I got local organic ones every day from a market that I walk to, but that's not possible for a lot of people. So frozen can function just as well, and you're still getting a lot of the health benefits, if not all of them, honestly, because freezing um, science has improved so much since I was a kid. Strawberries are just as good too. Strawberries kind of get a raw deal, but man, they have lots of antioxidants in them, and you can eat those instead of blueberries and get some benefits. So nuts and seeds, I think, is the last food group here I want to talk about. I think a really underutilized part of vegan nutrition and cooking even for now, but we'll see that is changing a little bit. Protein, minerals, fiber, health-promoting plant-based fats, omega-3 fatty acids. They can help lower cholesterol. They should be used in moderation because they are very calorically dense, but absolutely part of a healthy diet. You know, nut butters, peanut, almonds, sunflower. You know, I always joke, you know, nut butters, expensive peanut butter is worth the money. Huge advocate for that. Really good peanut butter is so tasty. You can make creamy sauces and dressings with it. You know, just because something is vegan and doesn't have literal like dairy cream in it doesn't mean we can't enjoy these same textures and flavors, and it can really replicate almost whatever you are used to. And we're seeing more of this now in the mainstream and making using nuts and seeds for sauces and dressings and things. They can boost protein and healthy fat. You can eat them as a snack. When I work with athletes, you know, I say, hey, listen, you need more healthy calories. You can make a pretty good sauce to add to things, right? And you can make sauces with beans as well. So it's not just nuts and seeds. And this is sort of how veganism can come together as being like healthy and delicious and good for the environment and also good for you. It doesn't mean you have to eat this whole food plant-based diet exclusively to get the benefits, but eating these foods can absolutely be part of a healthy diet that promotes longevity. And I think that is my last slide and leaves us 10 minutes for questions. If I covered anything too fast, I'm happy to go back. But I don't want to take time away from the environmental questions as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much to Matt, Victor, and Sailish. So we did receive some questions here, and I want to make sure we have time to get to them. But one of the questions was whether this would be recorded. So I do want to just answer that and say that I did record it. And that's something that we are going to be making available on our YouTube channel. So look out for that. We'll also post a link to it on our Facebook as well. So let me see. So one question we received here is, to what extent do you think lab-grown meat has the potential to address the environmental impacts of eating meat? Who wants to take that one?
So yeah, from an environmental impact perspective, lab-grown meat, you know, has the potential to reduce the resource usage, but it has no redeeming features as far as health is concerned. It's the same thing, right, that you would get by eating animal food. So the question is, why would you want to do that? You know, is it you probably want to do that just as a tide over to get to a plant-based world. So
Great.
I see it at best to be a transition food than anything else.
Great, thank you. So we had another question here, and I know Matt kind of addressed this a little bit, but I was just wondering if you could expand, is soy bad for you? Or maybe you could talk about how soy is good for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, soy is safe, it's healthy. Any sort of risks are way blown out of proportion. I mean, I mentioned that USDA health claim. It's so hard to get that with the USDA. They're so strict. Over 10 years of research for this claim to happen. And if soy was bad or detrimental for anyone, then there's no way we would have that health claim. And I'm sure I can link to in the chat about it. You know, I'd say most of the concerns that people have come from anti-vegan groups, you know, and we always say people love to hear they love to hear bad things about things they aren't doing, right? So they're like, oh, I was going to go vegan for the environment, but soy is bad for you, so I won't, you know. But no, soy is absolutely be part of a healthy diet, you know, 3 to 4 servings a day, definitely, and those isoflavones are beneficial for lowering cholesterol and maybe in cancer prevention too.
Great, thank you. And so I also just wanted to address, I'm going to get some more of these questions as well, but perhaps Victor could tell us a little bit more about it, but I will be sending some information to everyone via email. So first I'm going to be sending it's going to be in one email, but there's going to be a brief survey, which is just really helpful for our library, for our programming, especially now that we're doing everything virtual. We just really appreciate any feedback. But we're also going to include something from Vegan Outreach. Victor, would you want to tell them a little bit about what that's going to include?
Yeah. So I know somebody was asking there towards the end regarding recipes. The 10 Weeks to Vegan program is a program that Vegan Outreach started, and it's pretty simple. You get 1 email per week, and it's all free. And each email contains recipes, info, new products, nutritional information or advice, and it's for 10 weeks. And after 10 weeks, it just stops. So it kind of gives you kind of that support system. You know, if maybe you're alone in your home and you're the only one that wants to go vegan, don't know how, it kind of gets you going. And also in the first email, everything that Matt just talked about regarding the Get Healthy program, there's a link in that first email you get. So make sure you keep an eye out. And you can also sign up for both programs at the same time, I think. And you can get information on comfort foods and also on the healthier side with the Get Healthy program. So everybody will be able to sign up for that.
Great, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. With recipes, what I tell people all the time is you have to find a cookbook or a blog author or someone who speaks to you and how you like to cook, and how you like to eat. And it's out there. We can find it, man. There's so many cookbooks right now, you know, and there's no one way to do this. And so that's what I really suggest to people is find someone who uses the types of seasoning that you like, or maybe doesn't use obscure ingredients, or maybe they do use obscure ingredients because you like doing that, you know. So it's really about just finding it and making it your own. And I put in some links here to get started.
Great, thank you. And so we had another question. I think this one probably goes to Sailish. Is would you please explain why cows eat so much more than white rhinoceros?
Yeah. So because the cows have been genetically selected to produce enormous amounts of milk, way more than they would normally to feed their own babies. And so to produce that much milk, they have to keep eating a lot of food. And also dairy cows are usually always pregnant. So they're eating for 2 simultaneously. You know? This is why they eat more than a white rhinoceros. 3 times weight.
Yes, and uses up a lot of resources. Another question here from Elizabeth is asking, Matt, can you talk about vegetarianism and getting enough calcium? Is milk part of the plan, or can you get calcium from other foods?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, dairy milk is the most common source of calcium in the U.S., but it doesn't have to be. You know, in the 90s when I went vegan, it was like, okay, we need to replace dairy milk with soy milk. And so most soy milk is fortified. A lot of plant milks are fortified. So they have the same amount of bioavailable calcium as dairy milk. So you just swap that out. But thankfully, and this is where vegan nutrition is a little bit different, is that we can get calcium from all sorts of other foods. Corn tortillas, for example, have calcium. Leafy greens are an excellent source. You know, the one that we talk about most, even like white beans have calcium in them. Unhulled sesame seeds have calcium. Tofu, the way it's coagulated, has calcium. And so with vegan nutrition, it's different because we're not relying on one glass of something. We're getting calcium from a whole bunch of different sources. And that's really convenient. 1, because it increases absorption. And then 2, it's just nice to have that variety.
Great, thank you. And so we have a few more minutes here. Does anyone else have any final questions before we wrap up? And again, yeah, I will be sending an email. So if you want to opt into that, to to get recipes and other information from Vegan Outreach, they'll be able to send you that. And then you also just have a brief survey, which is really helpful for the library. If you don't mind doing that, we'd really appreciate it. Well, if there are no other questions, oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to point out too, with the 10 Weeks program, I mean, we do have one for the US, but we've also expanded to various different countries. If you have family in different countries, they can definitely sign up now. Me and my partner, Carlo, we also created the 10 Weeks to Vegan in Espanol for the US. Also, you can also sign up for that. And I'm going to go ahead and share the link where you can find all the programs. It's 10weeks.org in case you're in another country or from another country, or if you have family there, or if you speak Spanish and you prefer that, you can also sign up through there.
Excellent, thank you. Well, again, just a big thank you to everyone who joined us tonight, and I really appreciate Vegan Outreach for doing this event, and Matt Ruscigno, Victor Flores, and Dr. Sailish Rao for sharing your expertise on all these different multifaceted but interconnected issues. I really appreciate it. So big thank you to everyone, and you'll be receiving an email from us with the recording and the survey as well. So big thank you. Everyone have a good evening.
Great host. Happy to
Thank you.
be here.
Thank
Great
you,
discussion with everyone.
All right, thanks. Have a good evening, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.